Captain Malcolm Carter stood tall in his crisp military uniform, exuding the dedication and honor he had earned through years of service. The weight of his uniform felt both familiar and heavy. It bore the insignia of sacrifices made and dreams deferred. As he walked through the bustling halls of Fort Bragg, his heart swelled with pride, yet a quiet pang of self-doubt simmered beneath the surface. Fellow soldiers greeted him with nods, but he could sense the unspoken disconnect, a shadow of recognition that never fully materialized. As he entered the training ground, the air crackled with anticipation. Malcolm's gaze swept across the soldiers preparing for drills. Yet, before he could settle into the rhythm of the day, his attention was drawn to Private David Ellis, a fellow black soldier standing alone. Unease etched across David's face as he faced a group from another unit. "Hey!" One voice cut through the camaraderie. "Why don't you go back to where you came from?" The laughter that followed was jarring, and Malcolm could feel the heat of anger rise within him. This was more than mere words. It was an assault on dignity. "Back off!" Malcolm's voice rang out, commanding attention. The laughter faltered, and all eyes turned to him. He stepped forward, a protective instinct surfacing. "Who do you think you are?" A soldier retorted, emboldened by the crowd. "Just another black dude trying to be a hero?" Frustration surged in Malcolm. "This isn't about being a hero. It's about being human. You can't treat someone like this. Not here, not anywhere." Before he could press further, Colonel Richard Monroe stepped into the scene, his presence imposing. "What's going on here?" he demanded, scanning the crowd. "Sir, we need to address this," Malcolm started, but the colonel interrupted. "Enough!" Monroe barked, his tone leaving no room for discussion. "We have protocols in place. You'll address these issues the right way. Back to your training." He turned and walked away, leaving Malcolm feeling as if his concerns had been brushed aside like dust off a table. "Can you believe that?" David whispered, his voice shaking with anger and hurt. "I thought things were supposed to be different." Malcolm felt his heart sink. Returning to his unit felt like a retreat into silence, a space where his convictions threatened to dwindle. The hallway buzzed with indifferent chatter, yet Malcolm couldn't shake the heavy cloak of isolation. As he sat among his peers, he tried to voice his thoughts. "Guys, we need to talk about what just happened. Ignoring it won't make it go away," he said, his voice firm yet hesitant. His words fell into a void, met with dismissive shrugs and half-hearted nods. "Come on, Malcolm. We all know this is how it is. Let it go," one soldier muttered. As doubts swirled in his mind, Malcolm reflected on his family back home, the love and warmth awaiting him. He wondered how his decision to confront this injustice would echo in their lives. Would they be drawn into conflict as well? His hands trembled slightly as anxiety poured over him like ice water. That evening, he received a text from his younger sister, Tyra. "Malcolm, I heard about David. Is everything okay?" The concern in her words tugged at his heart. "Trying to make sense of it," he replied, staring out at the dimming sky. The setting sun painted a picture of hope, yet he couldn't shake the feeling of uncertainty. His family had always been his anchor, their strength a source of empowerment. Yet now, in the complex labyrinth of military life, he felt exposed and vulnerable. "I'll be all right," he typed back, though he wasn't so sure. As night fell, Malcolm looked out of his window, the stars shimmering in the vastness above. He thought about the faces behind the uniforms, their struggles, their suppressed stories. He felt a resolute stirring within him. This fight was bigger than him. It was for all those whose eyes remained cast downward, for those whose voices faded into silence. He would confront this injustice, not just for himself but for David, for his family, and for every soldier who had faced prejudice. This journey had only just begun, and the path might be filled with obstacles, but he would walk it with unwavering determination. He would forge a legacy of courage, inspiring those who came after him. With a deep breath, he stepped away from the window, ready to embrace the challenges ahead, ready to transform his pain into purpose. He would not be silenced. The fight for justice and equality was one he was prepared to lead. Malcolm walked the sterile halls of Fort Bragg, his military boots echoing with every step. The weight of his crisp uniform felt both familiar and heavy, containing within it the dedication and honor he had earned through years of service. Yet, as he passed fellow soldiers, the camaraderie he once cherished felt like a distant memory, replaced by an agonizing sense of isolation. Cold stares pierced him and hushed whispers hung in the air like a thick fog, wrapping around him and pulling him further into solitude. "Hey, Carter!" someone called from a distance. It was Anderson, a teammate he had trained with for years. But when Malcolm turned to greet him, he felt an uneasy shift. The friendly glint in Anderson's eyes was now clouded, replaced by a guarded expression that made Malcolm's heart sink. Malcolm forced a smile, but it felt strained. "What's up, Anderson?" Not much. Just keeping my head down," the soldier replied, looking away. As he walked past, Malcolm felt an ache in his chest. The warmth of friendship had slipped away, leaving only the chill of betrayal. The question gnawed at him, "Where do I belong?" Later, in the common area, Malcolm slumped into a chair, the early evening sunlight filtering through the windows. He grabbed the remote and turned on the news. His heart raced as the anchor's voice filled the room. The military leadership has issued a statement regarding the recent incident concerning Private David Ellis. Malcolm leaned in, eager to hear their response. The spokesperson's words carried a rehearsed tone devoid of sincerity. "The matter is under review. The military is committed to fostering a respectful environment for all service members." Malcolm's frustration boiled over. "Respectful environment?" he muttered, shaking his head. The words rolled off the spokesperson's tongue like syrup, too thick and unpalatable. He felt the anger rise within him as the news cycle moved on to lighter topics, brushing aside the gravity of the situation that felt like a punch to his gut. This wasn't just a headline. It was his life and the life of David, reduced to a vague public relations statement. Days passed, and public outrage began to brew outside the military gates. Protests erupted, demanding justice, accountability, and solidarity. But inside Fort Bragg, it was as if time stood still. Malcolm sensed a growing divide, a chasm widening between the institution he had devoted himself to and the reality he faced each day. He grappled with the crushing weight of duty. How could he uphold his commitment to the military when it felt so disconnected from the values he believed in? "Hey, Malcolm." Tom, a fellow soldier, approached him one afternoon, wearing an uncertain expression. "You're not getting involved in all that outside noise, are you?" "It's not noise, Tom. It's important. It's about what happened to David, what he endured because of this place." Malcolm shot back, his voice rising with barely contained frustration. "Just be careful. You don't want to end up on the wrong side of this," Tom warned gently, but the implications hung heavy in the air. The conflict swirled inside of Malcolm. It was becoming clearer that he felt completely alone. The whispers began to echo in his mind, planting seeds of doubt. "You're a troublemaker," they would say. "You can't change anything." Each muttered syllable chipped away at his resolve. As he grappled with these thoughts, self-identity became an unsettling question. "Am I a misfit?" Malcolm pondered. "Am I fighting a battle that's too heavy for me alone?" Moments of frustration turned into helplessness, yet he couldn't shake the fire igniting within him, the desire to speak out, to challenge the injustice, to defend not only David but every individual who felt marginalized in silence. But as he watched comrades turn their backs on him, fear overpowered resilience, and the cost of standing alone weighed heavily on his heart. That evening, as Malcolm lay in bed, weary from the emotional turmoil swirling in his mind, his phone buzzed with a message from his younger sister, Tyra. "Malcolm, I heard about David. Is everything okay?" Her words tugged at his heart, reminders of home and family. "Trying to sort it out." He tapped back, feeling a knot of guilt settle in his stomach. What was he supposed to say? The truth felt too heavy to carry. "Call me if you need to talk," she replied almost instantly. He could picture her, concerned eyes wide, offering solace from afar. With a deep breath, he stared out the window into the dark night, a tapestry of stars twinkling overhead. As he reflected on the painful reality of the situation, he visualized the faces of those who fought beside him. He picked up his journal scattered across the desk beside him and scratched out a line. "This fight is bigger than me." It was then that he realized he wasn't just in this for himself. He was fighting for David, for the choices he hadn't made, and for everyone whose voices had been stifled. Resilience was his armor, and he would not let it fade. In the days that followed, Malcolm made the decision to approach his commanding officers and demand accountability. When he walked into that office, his heart thundered in his chest. He was greeted with the cool, disinterested gaze of Colonel Monroe. "Captain Carter," the colonel said, folding his arms, "what brings you here?" "I need to address the incident involving Private Ellis. The culture here must change," Malcolm responded, each word coming forth like a battle cry. Colonel Monroe raised an eyebrow. "Isn't that an issue for handling through proper channels? You should let the system work." "The system isn't working for us," Malcolm challenged. "As soldiers, we're supposed to protect each other. What happened to David was unacceptable. I cannot stand by and do nothing." "You need to understand," Monroe said slowly, "that change is slow. You have to pick your battles. Then let's fight this one together," Malcolm insisted, determination hardening his resolve. "We owe it to ourselves and those who come after us to create an environment where everyone feels safe and valued. That sort of thing doesn't happen overnight, Carter." "No, but it starts with us, here and now." Malcolm's voice quivered with intensity, driven by the hope that somehow they could find common ground. As he turned to leave, he felt a flicker of doubt. Would they rally around him, or would he stand alone in the fight ahead? In the days that followed, whispers continued to circulate, and the growing storm of support reached Malcolm. Yet, he remained painfully aware that every ally could become a distant memory. Friends began to falter in their support, retreating under the heavy burden of fear. He felt the landscape shift with every lost connection, spiraling him into deeper introspection. Yet within that tumult, a flicker of hope stayed alive. With the backdrop of unrest surrounding him, he was determined to push forward, igniting the flames of change even if he couldn't see where they would lead. Through each challenge, Malcolm began to redefine what it meant to be a soldier, understanding that true service meant standing unwavering against prejudice, even if it meant risking everything he had built. He was ready to bear the weight of that responsibility, for the fight was far from over. With newfound determination, he prepared for what lay ahead. The voices of those who had come before him echoed in his mind, reminding him that courage wasn't the absence of fear, it was the triumph over it. With every step he took, he hoped to create a legacy not just for himself, but for all. The scene shifted as memories flickered like old reels in Malcolm's mind, revealing the painful history of racism woven into the very fabric of military life. He pictured his ancestors, brave black soldiers who fought valiantly in wars, only to return home to a nation still steeped in prejudice. A deep voice echoed within his mind, that of his grandfather, a World War II veteran who had faced the same struggles. "We fought for our country only to be treated as second-class citizens, son," the old man had said, his eyes glistening with unshed tears. Malcolm remembered the stories of injustice and honor, how his grandfather had earned medals but been denied a seat in restaurants. "Remember, Malcolm," his grandfather's voice rang with authority. "The fight isn't over, even after the uniforms come off." Those words resonate deeply within him, illuminating the weight of the ongoing struggle for dignity and respect. Malcolm understood that the echoes of the past were not just history. They were a call to action, urging him to confront the status quo. In a dimly lit community center, Malcolm gathered with a small group of allies, men and women, each driven by their own stories of hardship. The air was heavy with determination as they spread out military policy documents across the table. Each page held evidence of systemic bias, policies designed to protect that had been twisted instead to perpetuate discrimination. "Look at this," Malcolm pointed to a clause buried in the text. It explicitly allows for racial profiling in certain situations. His frustration bubbled as he read aloud. They've made it legal to treat soldiers differently based solely on color. A woman named Lisa, a veteran of the Iraq War, spoke up. I felt this in the field. I was overlooked for promotions because I wasn't part of the in crowd. They never said it outright, but I knew it was because of my skin color. As they continued to sift through the pages, each discovery added to their resolve, but also escalated their frustration. How is this still happening in 2023? Malcolm exclaimed, running a hand through his hair. We fought so hard, yet the walls of injustice are still standing strong. In the following days, Malcolm stepped outside the military walls to engage with the local community. The atmosphere buzzed with conversations in barbershops and cafes. The aroma of freshly brewed coffee mixed with the palpable tension in the air. There was a mix of doubt and skepticism regarding claims of progression. Things are changing, but not fast enough, an older man in the barbershop said, shaking his head. They always say they'll do better, but it's just talk. Malcolm nodded, feeling the weight of those words. The community's collective memory held a scrapbook of broken promises and false hopes. He sat quietly, absorbing the fears and frustrations shared around him. People are tired, a woman chimed in as she stirred sugar into her cup. We're just looking for real change. Malcolm felt a weight settle on his shoulders. He could sense the skepticism that had taken root in these conversations, forcing him to confront the broader societal belief that change was often merely superficial. That night, as he lay in bed, he reflected on the stories he had heard. Each tale echoed a painful cycle, a pattern where voices went unheard and justice was postponed. With each realization, he felt a fire ignite within him. This time, it would be different. He was committed to breaking this cycle, not just for himself but for everyone who had come before him and those who would follow. He could envision a future where every soldier was valued for their service, regardless of their color, where bravery shattered the confines of prejudice. With every breath, he felt the weight of responsibility, knowing that the struggle ahead would not be easy, but it was desperately needed. As dawn broke, he gathered with his allies once more. We have to act, he said, his voice filled with urgency. These documents show a clear picture of what's been happening. We can't just sit back and wait for someone else to do something. Lisa nodded, determination in her eyes. You're right, Malcolm, but how do we get the word out? How do we get others to listen? We start with our stories, Malcolm suggested. Let's share our experiences, gather testimonies from those affected. We'll build momentum and demand accountability. As he spoke, his conviction grew stronger, bubbling with the desire to create a movement that would resonate through the walls of Fort Bragg and beyond. They spent the next days collecting stories from fellow soldiers, documenting each instance of prejudice and discrimination. Each voice matters, Malik said passionately during one meeting. Together, we can make a difference. We can show those who think they can silence us that we will not be ignored. In the following weeks, they organized a town hall meeting to address the issues head-on, inviting community members, military leaders, and local media to listen. We need to be heard, Malcolm declared, pacing before the crowd. We are more than just soldiers. We are individuals who deserve respect and dignity. The crowd responded with murmurs of agreement, emboldened by Malcolm's unwavering spirit. As the meeting progressed, soldiers began to share their stories, each one a testament to the endurance of the human spirit in the face of adversity. As the last voice faded away, a heavy silence enveloped the room, filled with the weight of their collective struggle. Malcolm stood at the front, watching as the reality of their shared experiences began to sink in. People were moved. There was a sense of understanding growing among them. Then, from the back, an elderly gentleman rose to speak. We've heard you tonight. We see your pain, and we stand with you. His words carried conviction, echoing through the room and sending ripples of hope coursing through Malcolm's veins. In that moment, Malcolm felt a surge of empowerment. The journey ahead would be challenging, filled with obstacles and resistance, but they were not alone. They were a community ready to rise together, challenging the deep-seated prejudices that plagued their lives. Malcolm stepped forward as the meeting came to a close, adrenaline coursing through him. "This is just the beginning," he said, looking out at the faces of those who had shared their stories. "Together we can demand change. Together, we will not let our voices be silenced." The response was thunderous. A wave of applause erupted, filling the air with a palpable sense of solidarity. As Malcolm soaked in the sound, he felt his heart swell. Here was the strength he had sought, the connection he had desperately longed for. He left that night not just as a soldier, but as a leader aware of the challenge that lay ahead. He was more determined than ever to fight for justice, to forge a future where no one had to endure what so many had experienced before him. As the stars twinkled above, he took a deep breath, ready to embrace the fight for what was right. In the dim light of a community center, Malcolm felt a heavy weight pressing on his chest. The burdens of the past few weeks had settled in a tight knot of despair. But as he stepped forward into the bustling room, he noticed a group of advocates passionately discussing issues of racial injustice. Their voices were spirited, filled with determination and purpose. "And we cannot stand by while our brothers and sisters suffer in silence," one woman shouted, her voice piercing through his gloom. Malcolm hesitated at the entrance, watching from the shadows. Each word fueled a flicker of hope within him. He realized he was not alone in this fight. There were others here who understood his pain, who had experienced the same struggles. It was a connection he had desperately sought. "Come on, brother," a man called out, gesturing for him to join them. "We need more voices like yours." With a deep breath, Malcolm stepped forward, feeling a sense of camaraderie he hadn't experienced in a long time. "What can I do to help?" he said, determination infusing his voice. "Share your story," the woman replied, her eyes bright with encouragement. "Your experiences matter, and together we can make a difference." That night, as they shared their truths, Malcolm felt the chains of isolation begin to loosen, each narrative interwoven with his own, transforming the despair into a tapestry of resilience. His purpose was becoming clearer. The advocates motivated him, assuring him that justice could be fought for and achieved. Weeks later, as he followed up on this newfound connection, a retired veteran approached him after a community meeting. The veteran's face was lined with time and experience, his presence commanding respect. "I see you have that fire in you," he said, nodding at Malcolm. "I used to have it too. I remember well the battles we fought, not just against enemies overseas, but here at home." Malcolm listened intently, captivated by the veteran's stories of racism during his service. "They called me names, sidelined me from promotions, because of the color of my skin," the veteran revealed. His voice wavered with the weight of past injustices. "But it was our unity that made us strong." Malcolm felt deeply moved. "I thought it was just me. I thought I was fighting alone." "You're not alone, son," the veteran replied, placing a hand on Malcolm's shoulder. "Your struggle is part of a larger story. Use it as your strength. Rally those who stand with you." The conversation served as a calming balm to Malcolm's turmoil. The veteran offered both comfort and wisdom, laying a path toward a clearer future. Malcolm's heart swelled with renewed determination. He would not only fight for himself, but for every voice that remained silenced. Soon after, representatives from local NGOs took notice of Malcolm's plight. They reached out, eager to support his cause. As he sat in a makeshift conference room with community leaders, the atmosphere shifted from one of uncertainty to collective empowerment. "We are here to stand with you," said an organizer, her voice strong and uplifting. "We recognize the systemic bias that affects soldiers like you, and we intend to address it head-on." Malcolm's resolve solidified as he listened to their plans. Advocacy campaigns would be launched, focusing on training and education to confront racism within the military. It felt as if a dam had broken, allowing a flood of possibilities to rush in. "Together, we will dismantle the walls of ignorance and hatred," another advocate proclaimed, enthusiasm vibrant in the air. Malcolm's heart raced with optimism. "Let's do this," he said, feeling a fire ignite within him. Let's create lasting change. Days later, during a clandestine meeting, Malcolm met with a whistleblower who had crucial information regarding discriminatory practices hidden within the military. The individual spoke in hushed tones, ensuring they were out of earshot. "I couldn't stay silent anymore," the whistleblower said, glancing over their shoulder. "These policies that have been in place, they need to be exposed. You need this leverage to fight." Malcolm listened intently, each revelation further solidifying his determination. "Thank you for your bravery. This will help us push for real change." As the meeting wrapped up, the weight of the evidence filled him with resolve. He had the tools he needed to challenge the status quo and dispel the lies that had taken root for far too long. Returning home that night, he shared the day's developments with his family. They gathered around the kitchen table, a comforting space filled with familiarity and love. "Mom, Dad, I found others who believe in this fight," Malcolm declared, his voice firm yet hopeful. "We're going to expose what's been happening." His mother's eyes sparkled with pride. "Malcolm, you've always had that spirit. Just remember, we are with you." His father nodded, his voice steady. "Leverage our strength, son. You are not alone. This is our legacy." The unity of love and support fortified Malcolm, reminding him of the importance of family in the pursuit of justice. They began gathering evidence together. Each voice counted in the fight against injustice. As days turned into nights of planning and strategizing, Malcolm felt a change in the air, a charged anticipation akin to electricity. They were about to confront a significant injustice, and together, they would shine a light that could no longer be ignored. With each step forward, he treasured the concept of resilience that ran through their veins. The calls to action, the stories shared, and the unity felt like a chorus amplifying the truth they fought for. The battle ahead was daunting, but their spirits rose, igniting a shared hope that change was possible. As the days unfolded, Malcolm prepared to stand tall and demand justice, ready to embrace the weight of his family's legacy. No longer isolated in his struggle, he knew they were all in this together, a collective force ready to challenge the barriers of prejudice and discrimination. With unwavering determination propelling him forward, Malcolm lifted his chin high, ready to carve out a path of justice not only for himself but for generations to come. The moment to seek justice was now, and he was ready to answer the call. Through resilience and authenticity, he felt a profound shift within himself. He was not only a soldier, but also a leader determined to create a legacy of courage and empowerment, one that would echo through the annals of history. The fight had only begun, but together they would make their voices heard, and together they would change the tide. The room was dimly lit, the only light streaming in through dirty windows which cast long shadows across the scattered papers on the table. Malcolm and his team gathered in this somber space, filled with old documents and records, each representing the history of battles fought in silence. There was an unspoken tension in the air, an anticipation that heightened with every passing moment. "Okay, everyone, let's get to work," Malcolm said, his voice steady despite the weight that hung over them. They began sifting through a collection of records that chronicled decades of military service. Malcolm's heart raced as he opened a file to reveal account after account of discriminatory practices that had been buried deep in red tape. "Look at this," he exclaimed, holding up a paper. "This is exactly what we're fighting against." A fellow advocate, Lisa, leaned in closer, her brow furrowing as she read the document. "I can't believe this was allowed to happen. They have been sweeping these incidents under the rug for far too long," she replied, her voice laced with disbelief. As they continued to uncover the hidden injustices within the military, an overwhelming sense of purpose ignited Malcolm. "We have to expose this. It's time these stories see the light of day," he declared, fueled with passion. The realization that they were not alone in their fight pulled everyone closer together. Hours went by as they connected the dots, unveiling a harmful pattern of systemic bias. Piece by piece, the narrative came into focus, like a puzzle suddenly revealing its grand design. The emotional weight of their discoveries deepened their bond. Each shared revelation transformed their anger into a relentless drive for justice. "Look here," Malik pointed, excitement radiating from him. "This report shows that despite numerous complaints, nothing was ever addressed. They've been doing this for years." As the investigation progressed, tension began to build within the military ranks. Whispers filled the barracks as news of their activities spread. Malcolm could feel the eyes upon him. Some colleagues looked at him with respect while others eyed him with skepticism. "What are you trying to prove, Carter?" one soldier muttered as they passed in the hallway, the disdain clear in his voice. Malcolm stopped, confronting the man. "I'm trying to prove that we deserve better. We can't stay silent anymore." The tension was palpable, and beneath the bravado of his peers lay the fear of consequences that came with confronting the truth. Days turned into an emotional roller coaster as feelings of isolation challenged Malcolm's resolve. He grappled with the fear that came from standing up against those in power, the uncertainty hanging overhead like a storm cloud threatening to burst. Yet, every discovery urged him forward. He couldn't allow these truths to remain buried. Then, the local media arrived, their presence shifting the atmosphere drastically. Cameras flashed, and journalists set up equipment to capture the unfolding story. Malcolm felt a mix of exhilaration and vulnerability as he stood before them, his heart pounding. "Captain Carter, can you tell us about your efforts regarding military racism?" a reporter inquired, shoving a microphone towards him. Malcolm took a deep breath. "We've uncovered numerous instances of racial discrimination within the military. It's time to bring these issues to light and demand accountability." His words echoed throughout the room, and he could sense a wave of recognition from those present. The attention sparked something powerful. Other voices began to join the charge for reform. As more stories surfaced, Malcolm felt hope blossoming amidst the chaos. It was a spark igniting a fire, and for the first time in a long while, he felt invigorated by the collective push for change. Walking away from the press conference, a chill ran down his spine as a message buzzed on his phone. He glanced down to see an anonymous text. "Back off, or you'll regret it." Fear gripped him for a moment, causing him to halt in his tracks. "Malcolm, what's wrong?" Lisa asked, noticing the change in his demeanor. "It's nothing," he replied quickly, though his mind raced. The threats only solidified his resolve. He knew he could not back down now, not when so many were depending on his bravery. "We're doing this for a reason," he reminded himself, standing taller. The quest for truth and justice was fraught with peril, but he had come too far to retreat. His inner fire burned brightly as he glanced at his team, now like family, united in their pursuit. "You can't intimidate us. We're stronger together," he declared, a sense of empowerment swelling in his chest. With each day, they pressed forward, fueled by a unified determination to dismantle the discriminatory practices that plagued their community. As awareness spread, Malcolm discovered he wasn't just fighting for himself. He was standing up for every unheard voice, for the generations before him, and the ones that would follow. Every confrontation strengthened his spirit. With every document they uncovered and each story shared, the landscape of their fight began to change. The push for justice was relentless, and Malcolm stood as a beacon of resilience, inspiring those around him to join the battle for a future free from prejudice. With newfound resolve, he prepared for the challenges ahead, the journey filled with uncertainty but also hope. The path to justice was long and winding, but with every step, Malcolm solidified his commitment to fight, not just for himself, but for everyone who dreamed of a better tomorrow. As the day of the public hearing dawned, an electric tension filled the air. Malcolm stood in front of a packed hall, a sea of faces glaring back at him, each one watching intently. The sound of cameras clicking and microphones adjusting created a backdrop of noise, intensifying the pressure he felt. His heart pounded loudly in his chest, echoing the weight of the moment. It was more than just a hearing. It was a reckoning, a culmination of every struggle he had faced, every sleepless night spent wrestling with injustice. He took a deep breath, grounding himself in the realization that this was the moment where his truth would take center stage. The battle lines had been drawn, and today the world would hear him. Malcolm stepped forward, bracing himself as he adjusted the microphone. He felt the eyes of the audience resting upon him, and for a fleeting moment, doubt crept in. Was he strong enough? Did his story truly matter? But as he looked out across the room, seeing fellow soldiers who had endured similar struggles, he found the strength he needed. "This isn't just my story," Malcolm began, his voice trembling slightly but gaining momentum with each word. "It's the story of every soldier who has suffered in silence." A ripple of recognition swept through the audience as his passion radiated. "It's about everyone who has been dismissed, discounted, and devalued simply because of the color of their skin." His words formed a vivid picture of injustice, igniting the crowd's emotions. "We are not just numbers on a roster. We are human beings deserving of respect. It's time that we hold accountable those in power who choose to perpetuate a culture of discrimination." The applause that followed was thunderous, igniting a warmth in his chest. Malcolm watched as supporters began to rise, one by one, stepping up to share their own experiences. The atmosphere shifted as voices filled the room, each testimony a thread woven into the larger tapestry of their shared struggle. "I faced slurs and hostility from day one," a veteran named Sarah recounted, her voice steady yet laced with pain. "I was treated differently because of my skin, and no one did anything about it." The room fell silent, the weight of her account gripping everyone present. As more individuals spoke, Malcolm felt a swell of pride. Each story carried an emotional weight, and the audience hung on every word. One after another, the testimonies transformed helplessness into empowerment, shedding light on the dark corners of systemic discrimination that had long been ignored. When it seemed that the emotional tide had reached its peak, the unexpected happened. An anonymous figure stood up, their face partially obscured by a hood. "I have information," they said, their voice soft but commanding attention. The air crackled with anticipation as everyone leaned forward. "Years ago, I witnessed cover-ups." The room gasped collectively. "I saw misconduct that was swept under the rug. It's time we exposed the truth." Malcolm's heart raced as the tension in the room magnified. This revelation was not just pivotal. It was the catalyst they needed. The figure continued, detailing accounts that echoed the very issues Malcolm had been bringing to light. The sense of urgency grew, voices murmuring approval, and it became clear this was a turning point. As the testimonies and revelations unfolded, military officials sitting at the front began to fidget, their bravado wavering. Malcolm watched with a keen eye as their facade cracked under the weight of undeniable evidence. The faces that had once seemed unmovable now revealed signs of discomfort. They were being held accountable. Malcolm recognized the significance of this moment. He needed to push harder. "This is only the beginning," he declared fiercely, rallying the crowd. "We must not let this silence echo any longer. We owe it to ourselves and to those who have fought this battle before us to bring about real change." The media, capturing every moment, began to ask pointed questions. "What steps will you take to ensure these practices are addressed?" A journalist pressed, their notepad ready. As the hearing reached its climax, the atmosphere was charged. Military officials tried to justify their actions, but they struggled to maintain composure. Each faltering statement only served as a reminder of their failures. Malcolm felt hope swell within him. Change was in the air, and it was palpable. "Justice is no longer a distant dream," he proclaimed, feeling the strength of the crowd behind him. "It is a demand we make today." The applause roared, resonating with the powerful energy of those who had come together in solidarity. Malcolm stood taller, his heart filled with determination, knowing that they had ignited a movement that could not be overlooked. This was their moment, their time to shine, to break down the barriers that had long upheld the status quo. The tide was turning, and together, they would make their voices heard. Holding onto this hope, Malcolm remembered the countless soldiers who had come before him, fueling his resolve. Together, they would not only seek justice but achieve it. As the hearing drew to a close, he saw the promise of change reflected in the eyes of his fellow soldiers. The promise of a future where no one had to endure the pain of prejudice again. And with that resolve solidifying in his heart, Malcolm stepped forward, ready to embrace the challenge ahead, ready to be the voice that would change the course of history. Malcolm stood before the panel, his heart racing as a wave of emotions surged within him. The room was filled with officials, members of the community, and fellow soldiers, their eyes fixed on him, a mixture of anticipation and concern evident on their faces. Deep breath in, he reminded himself that this moment was crucial. He had come to recount the injustices he had witnessed and experienced, knowing that his courage could set the stage for real change. "This isn't just my story," he began, his voice steady but laced with underlying emotion. "It's the story of many, soldiers like Private David Ellis, who deserve respect and dignity in the military." As he spoke, he could see glimmers of hope reflected in the eyes of those gathered. The atmosphere shifted, palpable tension giving way to a sense of gravity as he laid bare the reality that had been hidden for so long. Malcolm leaned forward slightly, emphasizing his words. "I've faced discrimination not just from outsiders, but within the very ranks that are supposed to protect us. This has to change." The officials exchanged glances, understanding that his testimony resonated with undeniable sincerity. He concluded, "If we don't confront this, we will never move forward. Justice depends on us taking action now." As he finished speaking, a sense of vindication washed over him. He could feel the tension in the room thrum like a vibrating string. It was clear that change had become inevitable. In the days that followed, the announcement of the official investigation sent shockwaves throughout the military community. News spread like wildfire, and Malcolm watched as officials began to take the allegations seriously. Reporters lined up, eager to capture every moment. The media buzzed with excitement, and narratives began to shift. "Did you see the statement from the general?" a soldier remarked at the mess hall, excitement clear in his voice. "He's finally addressing the issue head-on." Malcolm felt a mixture of relief and disbelief wash over him. Their struggles were finally being validated. A truth that had long been suppressed now came to light. As the dust settled, Malcolm channeled his energy into advocacy. He rallied fellow soldiers and community members, uniting them in the push for systemic change within the military. "Together, we can demand reforms," he urged during a community meeting, his voice fortifying within the gathering. "We need diversity training, protocols designed to prevent discrimination, and we must hold ourselves accountable." Hands shot up as fellow soldiers joined the conversation, eager to share ideas and draft proposals. Malcolm inspired those around him to confront stereotypes and embrace the values of inclusion and respect. With each proposed idea and each spoken word, Malcolm ignited a spark of hope among them, fueling their collective resolve. Weeks passed, and with public support mounting, the military initiated a series of diversity training programs aimed at fostering inclusion and understanding. Malcolm watched closely as changes took shape, each workshop a step toward healing past wounds. Soldiers engaged in candid discussions about systemic bias, their conversations becoming a balm for collective scars. "Why did I never notice this before?" one soldier admitted during a discussion, his voice heavy with shame. Malcolm felt a knot of empathy and relief, knowing this awakening was part of the healing process. "In our journey toward equity, we must be willing to listen and learn," Malcolm encouraged, feeling the weight of their shared histories begin to lighten. The commitment to change permeated the military. The shifts in attitude signaled a new dawn of unity. As the day of recognition dawned, the community gathered to honor those who had bravely confronted prejudice. Malcolm stood near the podium, feeling the anticipation in the air. His heart surged with gratitude and pride. When it was his turn to speak, the applause that erupted felt like a wave crashing over him. As he accepted his award, he looked out into the crowd, filled with supporters whose faces reflected admiration and shared resilience. "This journey began not just with me," he addressed them, his voice steady. "It began with every soldier who fought against discrimination, every person who dared to speak out. We are sowing the seeds of change." The applause reverberated through him, affirming that his voice mattered, that their collective fight was making an impact. Standing alongside the veterans and allies who had supported him, Malcolm reflected on the transformation not just within the military but also within himself. He was no longer the scared soldier worried about standing alone. He had become a beacon of hope for others. As the ceremony came to a close, Malcolm's heart swelled with a mixture of pride and resolve. The journey was far from over, but he knew that together, they had begun cultivating a more equitable future. By facing their barriers and hardships, embracing resilience, and honoring their shared history, they created a legacy of courage that would inspire future generations. With each step forward, Malcolm felt empowerment take root, spreading hope and courage within the very fabric of their community. As he stepped down from the stage, he made a silent vow to continue this fight, not just for himself, but for all who had come before him and all who would follow. Together, they were stronger, and together, they would create a brighter, more inclusive world. Malik stood at the edge of a quiet park, the sun dipping low on the horizon. The serene beauty of the moment contrasted sharply with the turmoil in his heart. As he gazed out at the vibrant colors painting the sky, memories flooded his mind, images of lost comrades, the unyielding fight for justice, and victories that once felt so distant. Each recollection was a stepping stone that had led him to this very moment. He thought of his brothers and sisters in arms, the faces of those who stood with him during the darkest times. Their unwavering support had lit the way through the shadows of prejudice that loomed large around them. A mix of pride and sorrow filled his heart. This fight was not merely for himself, but for all those who would come after, for those whose voices had been silenced for far too long. Change starts here, he whispered to himself, letting the tranquility of the park wash over him. It starts with reflection and understanding. He took a deep breath, savoring the clarity that came with it. It was a reminder that the journey ahead was not just about battling injustice, but also about embracing the collective stories that shaped their fight. With renewed purpose, he stepped onto the stage at a bustling local community event. The energy in the room was palpable, buzzing with anticipation as he surveyed the audience. A wave of determination washed over him, reminding him of the importance of this moment. He opened his mouth, feeling the weight of the words he had rehearsed and rewritten countless times. "We must not turn a blind eye," he began, his voice steady at first. "This journey we're on isn't just mine. It belongs to every single person who has suffered because of the color of their skin." Malik's voice rose with passion as he spoke, igniting a fire within those who listened. True change only occurs when we confront the systems that perpetuate inequality. We owe it to each other to challenge injustice, not just with our words, but with our actions. He spoke of the struggles they faced, detailing the moments of despair and hopelessness that had marked his journey. Faces in the crowd tightened with empathy, nodding in agreement as he emphasized the urgency of his message. We can't sit by and watch as our brothers and sisters continue to be silenced. We have the power to change our trajectory. As he finished, a wave of applause erupted, filling him with hope and determination. It was a confirmation that his fight resonated. It connected with the hearts and minds of those in front of him. But he knew this was only the beginning. Recognizing the necessity for collaboration, Malik sought out local activists and grassroots organizations committed to ending racism. They came together to form a coalition, united by a shared vision of military reform and broader societal change. Their meetings quickly became a sanctuary of inspiration and determination, fueled by shared stories and collective strategies. Laughter and tears filled the space as bonds were forged and friendships blossomed. "We need to draft proposals for systemic change," he suggested one evening, excitement radiating through the group. "Let's include diversity training and real repercussions for discriminatory actions." Lisa chimed in, her eyes animated with possibility. The energy was infectious, and Malcolm could feel the hope building as they strategized on how to amplify their message throughout the community. "We can't do this alone," he reminded them, his voice strong. "Together, we are a force to be reckoned with." Each partnership forged added depth to their mission and amplified their voices, rallying for accountability in their communities. As momentum built, Community programs focused on education and awareness began to flourish. Malik stepped up, organizing workshops to teach individuals how to recognize and combat racism in their everyday lives. He wanted these initiatives to foster candid discussions where vulnerability was welcomed. Weeks later, in a warmly lit community center, participants filled the seats, anticipation hanging in the air. "Thank you all for being here," Malik began, his heart full as he scanned the room. "This is our opportunity to share, to learn, and to grow together." A participant raised a hand, her voice shaking slightly. "I've been afraid to speak up. I don't want to be seen as a troublemaker." Malik nodded, providing a reassuring smile. "Speaking out doesn't make you a troublemaker. It makes you brave, a true warrior for change. Your voice matters." As the workshops went on, more individuals began to share their stories. Some revealed deep-seated pain from years of mistreatment, while others expressed their fear of stepping forward. Each story became a thread in the larger fabric of resilience. Malik watched as participants connected with one another, collectively reassuring each other that they were not alone. The transformative power of these discussions began to take root, creating a ripple effect that spread hope and resilience throughout the community. "After today," he said as the workshop came to a close, "we need to take these conversations beyond these walls. We are building a movement of courage. It's time to stand up, speak out, and demand change." As conversations surrounding racial injustice grew in intensity, Malik took to the podium once more during a public panel discussion. He scanned the audience filled with eager listeners, and a wave of courage washed over him. Combating discrimination is not just the responsibility of a few, it is a shared responsibility. His eyes locked onto various faces in the audience, imbued with hope. "Every single one of you has a role to play in this fight. Let us stand united." With each word, he felt a shift within the room, recognizing that they were building a legacy, not just for today, but for future generations. As he finished, the applause filled the air, resonating with shared determination and solidarity. Malik stepped down from the podium, a sense of accomplishment swelling within him. The journey was far from over, but he understood now that there was strength in their unity. Each small step taken would create pathways for others to follow, illuminating the darkness that had so long shrouded their lives. As the gathering dispersed, he looked around, feeling the energy of collective purpose. It was a long road ahead, but as he linked arms with his friends and allies, he knew he was not standing alone. Together, they would cultivate change, ensuring that their voices would echo through time, unwavering and rich with hope. As the echoes of change reverberated through the halls of power, Malik stood in a crowded legislative chamber, heart pounding with a mixture of apprehension and hope. Lawmakers convened passionately, their voices rising in energy fueled by the collective stories of those who had fought tirelessly for justice. The air buzzed with urgency, as advocates rallied around them, ready to demand accountability. "Today, we have the opportunity to enact real change," a senator proclaimed, standing at the podium, his face flushed with conviction. "We cannot let the voices of the oppressed be drowned out any longer." Malik exchanged glances with his allies. Their familiar expressions of determination reflected the weight of their struggle. Each testimony shared in these meetings served as a powerful reminder of the necessity for new policies aimed at eradicating discrimination at its roots. "When we unveil these new policies," another activist remarked under her breath, "we're not just writing words, we're igniting a movement." As the senator began to outline the new policies aimed at increasing oversight of military conduct, Malik felt a warmth spread through the room. "We are committed to ensuring compassion and respect within our military ranks," the senator continued, his voice radiating hope. "These changes will not only protect service members, but honor the sacrifices made by all who serve." Malik felt a surge of pride as he realized that their efforts had finally sparked a movement compelling leadership to take action. "This is it," he whispered to himself, feeling the energy in his chest escalate. Change is on the horizon. As the news of the mandated changes spread, communities reacted with a mix of relief and cautious optimism. Town hall meetings erupted with excited conversations about the implications of the new policies. Malik joined one such meeting, feeling invigorated as he watched his neighbors speak passionately about their experiences with prejudice, sharing stories of hardship and resilience. "I never thought things would change," an older woman said, her voice shaking slightly. "But now I feel empowered." Malik raised his hand. "Your voice matters. Together, we can shape the future and make sure what happened to David doesn't happen again." The dialogue ignited a fire within Malik, as individuals shared their burdens with each other, reinforcing the sense of community. They tackled the difficult topics, discussing how these legislative shifts could alleviate some of the weight they had carried for far too long. "Change is here, and we need to embrace it," Malik said, feeling hope ripple through the crowd. Every story shared was a testament to their strength, a reminder that each of them played a part in the larger narrative of justice. In response to the growing demand for equality, national anti-bias training programs began to expand across various institutions. Malik immersed himself in each workshop, standing alongside experts and community leaders, eager to teach military personnel about the importance of understanding racial equity. As participants engaged in discussions, Malik facilitated conversations that required them to confront their biases. "It's important to listen," he urged, his voice strong. "Empathy is the first step toward understanding." "Why should we change?" one participant shouted during a heated debate. "This is how it's always been." Malik held his ground, determined to create a safe space for expression. "Because only through change can we honor the sacrifices of those who have come before us. We owe it to ourselves and to the next generation." With every session, moments of breakthrough arose, revealing surprising vulnerability. "I never viewed it that way before," a soldier admitted, his face reflecting deep contemplation. Malcolm watched as the seeds of change took root, encouraging a cultural transformation that would resonate far beyond their current reality. A national dialogue on racial equity began to emerge, welcoming individuals from all backgrounds to participate in the conversation. Malik found himself at the forefront, representing the voices that had long been silenced. Panel discussions featured activists, educators, and military personnel alike, addressing critical questions about race, justice, and inclusion. "Every story shared is a step toward understanding," he said earnestly, looking around the room filled with diverse perspectives. "This is how we strengthen our community." As they exchanged ideas, connections began to form. Bridges were built through shared narratives, and the fabric of the community grew stronger. Malik felt a swell of pride as he noticed allies rallying together, ready to advocate for a more equitable future. "Change doesn't come without difficulty," he reminded the group. "It takes courage to confront our past and challenge the status quo." The intensity of each conversation illuminated the room as they laid the groundwork for lasting change. As weeks passed, the energy continued to build into infectious momentum, culminating in vibrant advocacy campaigns that sprang forth across the nation. Street art emerged, proclaiming messages of solidarity, while social media campaigns buzzed with a collective fervor for change. Malik participated in rallies, standing shoulder to shoulder with passionate advocates who boldly took to the streets. "Justice for all," they chanted, their voices echoing through the vibrant city, reverberating with the strength of their mission. Each march felt more significant than the last, igniting a transformative energy that positioned communities at the forefront of the movement. "This is just the beginning," Malik declared, driving home their point. "Together, we will reclaim our narrative and demand the respect we deserve." As the days turned into weeks, momentum grew, fueled by the shared dedication to confront racism head-on. The road ahead remained long and winding, but Malik felt a renewed sense of purpose now more than ever, knowing they were heading in the right direction. "Let's keep pushing," he told his comrades one evening, a fire igniting in his eyes. The fight for justice is not just a moment. It's a lifelong commitment. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a warm glow across the sky, Malik felt a surge of community and strength around him. He understood that together they were paving the way for future generations, embodying resilience and authenticity in their quest for justice. Together, we thrive, he proclaimed, his voice ringing out true as the faith he held in his heart. The movement they built would grow, shaping a world founded on respect and inclusivity. With a renewed spirit, they stood united, ready to forge ahead, knowing that this was just the beginning of their impact against prejudice and for a brighter tomorrow. As the venue filled with supporters, a palpable energy rippled through the room. Malik stood before the crowd, his heart racing as he felt the weight of history bearing down on him. The audience was a mosaic of military personnel, community members, and advocates, all eagerly anticipating his message. This was not just another speech. It felt like the culmination of a significant journey that stretched far beyond the walls of this gathering. The ripples of one voice can change the tide of history. He began, his voice steady yet passionate. He looked out over the sea of faces, gathering strength from their shared resolve. Together, we have faced challenges that many would shy away from. We have endured, fought back, and found light even in the darkest corners. Today, I stand before you not just as an individual, but as a voice for all who have been marginalized, drowned out, or silenced. Malik reflected on their collective journey. The protests, the testimonies, the late-night talks about fear and hope. Each struggle, each moment of doubt, has brought us closer to this point. It is time to rise against injustice. He continued, his voice resonating with hope and determination. Together, we can pave the way for a future where every soldier feels respected and valued for their service, regardless of their background. We must commit to inclusion. As he delivered his closing speech, the audience leaned in closer, absorbing his message. Their expressions shifted from anticipation to a shared urgency, and the room fell into a profound silence, absorbing the significance of his words. Change isn't just about policy, Malik asserted, addressing the room with a newfound fervor. It's about cultivating a culture that respects diversity. We need to foster an environment where everyone feels empowered to speak their truth without fear of retribution. Absolutely, an audience member called out, voicing agreement. It's time for the military to represent all of us. Malik's heart soared at the response. Yes, this battle transcends individual efforts. It calls on those in power to take responsibility for the legacy they leave behind. Together, we can create a community that thrives on respect and understanding. The audience nodded in agreement, moved by his sincerity. He knew in that moment that they were ready to turn his words into lasting action. As his speech came to an end, a wave of applause erupted, echoing through the hall. It felt like the opening of a new chapter. As Malik stepped off the stage, he was met with standing ovations, a warmth flooding his chest. He scanned the faces in the crowd, witnessing the strength of hope reflecting back at him. At that moment, community leaders stood together, ready to announce their commitment to change. One representative stepped forward, holding a microphone. Inspired by Malik's unwavering advocacy and courage, we are proud to introduce scholarships for marginalized youth, she declared. These scholarships represent our commitment to ensuring that the next generation has the resources to pursue their dreams, regardless of their background. Malik's heart swelled with pride as the crowd erupted into cheers. The impacts of his fight were becoming more than just words. They were turning into tangible actions meant to empower countless young minds. This moment marked not only an acknowledgement of his contributions, but a promise to continue the fight for justice and equity long after he stepped away from this podium. As he glanced at the audience, he saw faces light up with hope, determination evident in their eyes. Across the community, the ripple effects began to take shape. The media captured these pivotal moments, broadcasting powerful messages of solidarity that resonated across the nation. Malik watched as the news segments spotlighted the community's resolve to embrace diversity and foster inclusion, urging society to reflect on the lessons learned from their journey. Public conversations around race and equality gained traction, and Malik's heart ignited as ordinary individuals began to join the cause. "Look at them," he said to Lisa, his closest ally. "People are rising up, supporting each other. It's beautiful. Just wait," she replied, smiling. "This is just the beginning, Malik." As advocacy campaigns flourished, movements sprung forth, illustrated through powerful street art and social media campaigns that could not be ignored. Malik participated in rallies, standing shoulder to shoulder with passionate advocates who boldly took to the streets, shouting for justice. "This is our moment," they chanted. "Justice for all." The air buzzed with energy, and Malik thrived in it, feeling the collective impact magnify as they marched forward. "Each voice matters, and together we can be the change we wish to see," he shouted, his determination ringing clear. The energy of the people around him fueled his spirit, reminding him that they were not just voicing their grievances. They were taking action to reclaim their narrative. In the closing moments of the rally, with the weight of the world still pressing on his shoulders, Malik stood before the crowd once more, his eyes shining with resolve. "Let us carry this momentum forward," he implored. "Each of us has a role to play in shaping a future where inclusivity thrives. We are a community united for justice." As he stepped away from the microphone, the roar of the crowd washed over him like a wave, invigorating his spirit. He was filled with gratitude for every supporter, every voice that joined in their collective fight. With the seeds of change now planted, Malik felt an unwavering commitment to push for justice. The journey had not been without doubt, but with every speech, every march, and every ally he encountered, his resolve only grew stronger. He was reminded that the power of resilience and authenticity lay within their shared stories and struggles, and that together, they could overcome any adversity that lay ahead. As the sun set, painting the sky in brilliant hues, Malik took a deep breath. He understood that while the journey ahead was long, with each passing day, they shaped a legacy that would echo through generations, the legacy of courage, solidarity, and unwavering hope.